My name is Aisha Brennan, and on the morning of my 16th birthday, my mother handed me a black garbage bag. Not a gift, not a card, a garbage bag filled with my clothes. She held it out through the front door with one hand, and with the other hand, she held the door itself, barely open, blocking the rest of the house behind her like I was a stranger who had wandered up the front path. "You need to go," she said. I was still in my pajamas. It was 7 in the morning. I was 16 years old. I took the bag, because what else do you do when your mother holds something out to you? I took it, and I stood on the front step, and the door closed, and I heard the lock turn. A dead bolt. She locked a dead bolt against her 16-year-old daughter on her birthday. I stood on that step for a long time. And what happened to me after that, over the next 4 years, is something I have to tell you, because there are things you need to know about what girls survive, and what they build, and what they become, when the people who should have protected them do exactly the opposite. Before I take you there, take a second to like and subscribe, but only if stories about surviving the unsurvivable and becoming something nobody predicted mean something to you. Drop a comment telling me where in the world you're watching from and what time it is there. I read them all, and I want you to know that you are not alone in whatever you're carrying tonight. Now let me start from the beginning. I want to tell you about my mother before I tell you about the garbage bag, because she wasn't always the woman who locked the door. Or maybe she was and I just didn't know it yet. Her name is Denise. She was 22 when she had me, young, single, working 2 jobs in a town that didn't have much to offer a young woman without a degree and with a baby on her hip. My father was not in the picture. He left before I was born and existed in my life only as a name I knew and a face I'd seen once in a photograph that my grandmother kept on her refrigerator. Denise tried in the early years. I have real memories of her trying, making my lunch in the morning before school, the specific smell of the peanut butter sandwiches she cut diagonally, because she knew I liked them better that way. Reading to me at night, sometimes, when she wasn't too exhausted from the second job. Braiding my hair on Sunday mornings with the TV on in the background, the both of us watching cartoons while her hands moved through my hair with a practiced gentleness. Those are real memories. I kept them for years like small, valuable objects. The trying stopped when Raymond came. Raymond arrived when I was 8. He was older than my mother by 12 years. He drove a nice car and wore a watch that caught the light, and he brought my mother flowers the first time he came to the house, which she told me about twice that night, while she made dinner. He was charming to her in the beginning. He was not charming to me. It wasn't dramatic. Not in the early months. It was the particular coldness of a man who had decided a child was furniture, present, unavoidable, but not requiring acknowledgement. He looked through me. He talked around me. When I spoke at dinner, he waited for me to finish with the patience of someone enduring something. My mother noticed, and chose not to notice. I was old enough to see the choosing. That was the thing that cut deepest. Not Raymond's coldness. He owed me nothing, and I knew it in the blunt way of children who grow up early. What cut was my mother seeing his coldness and deciding that her relationship was worth more than her daughter's comfort. After a year, they were serious. After 2, he had moved in. After 3, they were engaged. By the time I was 12, the house that had been ours, messy and small and mine, was Raymond's house. And Raymond's house had rules. His rules. I want to be careful here about what I say and what I don't say. I am not going to tell this story in a way that asks you to absorb things that shouldn't be put into words for public consumption. What I will say is that Raymond made my mother into a different person, slowly, the way that certain people do to people who are lonely and afraid of going back to being alone. He redefined things, redefined what was acceptable, redefined what I was allowed to do and say and need. And my mother, who had braided my hair on Sunday mornings, learned his definitions. By the time I was 14, I had learned to make myself very small in that house. I stayed in my room, I did my homework, I did not ask for things. I ate what was available when Raymond wasn't around, and ate separately, or not at all when he was. I cleaned my own clothes, made my own meals, managed my own school schedule without asking for help. Because asking for help drew attention, and attention drew outcomes I had learned to avoid. I was an excellent student. Not because school was easy, because school was the place where I existed as a full person, where a teacher named Mrs. Okafor looked at me like I was worth looking at, where the library was a room I could breathe in, where I could be Aisha, who was smart and curious and capable, rather than Aisha, who was in the way. I held on to school like a rope. I was holding it tight on the morning of my 16th birthday when my mother handed me the garbage bag. What had happened the night before was an argument. The last in a sequence of arguments that had been escalating for months. I want to be honest, I did not go quietly. I had spent 2 years being very small, and something had started to push back inside me. A particular quality of refusal that I had felt growing in my chest since around 15. A resistance to being managed into nothingness that I didn't have full words for, but that expressed itself in the only way available to it. I talked back. Not cruelly, not with the kind of words that deserved the response they got. I said, at the dinner table on the evening of my 15th birthday eve, I have a right to be here too. That was it. 7 words. In response to something Raymond had said, something dismissive, something that drew a boundary around a space I was excluded from, the details aren't important. I have a right to be here too. Raymond went still. My mother looked at her plate, and I felt the room change temperature in the way I had learned to read with great precision over the years. The consequence for those 7 words unfolded slowly, over months, in the particular way that control unfolds in households where one person has made themselves the authority. Privileges removed, accusations made, that I was difficult, disrespectful, ungrateful. Conversations between Raymond and my mother that I heard through walls, and that had a direction I could trace even without hearing every word. By the night of my 16th birthday eve, I had been told explicitly to leave twice. Both times my mother had pulled it back. Both times I had believed the pulling back was love. The third time, she let it stand. I had said, when Raymond told me to get out of his sight, "She's my mother. This is my home." He had called her in from the other room, and she had looked at me, and she had said, "You make everything so hard." Not him, not the situation, me. I went to bed. I slept in my clothes. I think because some part of me already knew. And in the morning, the door. The garbage bag. The dead bolt. I sat on the front step for probably 20 minutes. Then I picked up the garbage bag and I walked. Not to anywhere specific. My feet just moved because standing still felt like giving up, and I was not yet ready to give up. I walked in the direction of school because that was the place I knew how to be. It was a Saturday. School was closed. I sat on the steps at the front of the building with my garbage bag beside me, and I thought through what I had, which was this: the clothes in the bag, the backpack I'd had on my shoulder when I answered the door, because I'd been packing it for a Saturday study session. Inside the backpack, my school books, my notebook, my pencil case, my phone with 43% battery, and a plan that had run out 12 months earlier, and $11.60. $11.60. I was 16 years old, and I had $11.60 and a garbage bag of clothes, and it was my birthday. I sat on those school steps, and I allowed myself exactly 1 period of crying. Specific and bounded. I put my face in my hands, and I let it be as big as it was for about 15 minutes, and then I wiped my face on my sleeve. And I thought, who do I know? The answer was small. Raymond's presence in our lives had slowly contracted my world. Sleepovers stopped being approved. Friendships were complicated by a home I was ashamed to invite people into. The ordinary social infrastructure of a teenager systematically dismantled. But there was one name: Priya Nair. We had been in the same math class since 7th grade. She sat 2 rows over. She had a way of explaining things, not just math, everything, that made them more bearable. She had noticed, in the quiet way that observant people notice things, that something was not right in my life. She had never pushed. She had never made me perform a story I wasn't ready to tell. She had just, periodically, made room. I called her. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey," she said. "Priya," I said. "I need help." A pause. "Tell me where you are," she said. She didn't ask what happened. She asked where I was. She arrived 20 minutes later with her older brother Rohan driving. She got out of the car and she looked at me and the garbage bag and she said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "You're coming to our house." "I can't ask. You didn't ask," she said. "I'm telling." She picked up the garbage bag. "Rohan, can you put this in the trunk?" Rohan, who was 19 and had the easy kindness of someone who had grown up in a household where kindness was the baseline, put the bag in the trunk without comment. I got in the back seat. I looked out the window as we drove away from the school, and I felt, underneath the fear and the grief and the $11 in my bag, something very small and very important. Someone had come. The Nair household was the first safe house I had ever been in. I don't mean safe in the dramatic sense. I mean safe in the ordinary, profound, deeply specific sense of a home where people are simply kind to each other, where the temperature of the room doesn't change based on one person's mood, where a 16-year-old girl with a garbage bag was offered the guest room and a towel and dinner, and nobody made her explain herself before she was ready. Priya's mother, Meena, fed me that first night without asking a single question. She put a plate in front of me and sat across the table and talked about ordinary things, a show she was watching, something funny that had happened at the grocery store, and I ate and I felt my shoulders descend from where they had been living, somewhere near my ears, for years. Later, in Priya's room, I told her everything. She sat cross-legged on her bed, and she listened with her whole face, not interrupting, not performing sympathy, just actually there. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Okay," she said, "we're going to figure this out. Not, how terrible. Not, I'm so sorry. Not, you should call the police or go back and apologize or wait for your mom to calm down. We're going to figure this out." She was 16 years old. She spoke like someone who intended to keep a promise. Meena and her husband, Vijay, sat me down the next morning. Vijay was an accountant, a quiet man who expressed care through practical action, which turned out to be exactly what the situation required. "You can stay here," Meena said, "for as long as you need. But we need to understand your situation so we can help you properly." I told them the full version. The version I hadn't told Priya, the years of it, the specific quality of what the house had been like, the escalation. They listened. Vijay asked careful questions, not challenging ones, just building a picture. Then he said, "First thing Monday, we're going to school. We're going to talk to your guidance counselor. There are systems for this. You are a minor and you have rights, and we're going to make sure those rights are being used." "I don't want to cause Aisha," Meena said gently. "You are not the one who caused this." She said it simply, without dramatizing it. Just, "This is the truth," stated plainly. I had to look at the table for a moment because something in my chest was doing something large. "Okay," I said. "Good," said Vijay, and he went back to his tea. Monday morning changed things. My guidance counselor was a woman named Miss Patterson. She had been at the school for 20 years and had the specific quality of someone who had seen a lot of situations and had learned to respond to each one with the particular attention it required rather than a formula. She listened to me for 45 minutes. Then she made calls. The first call was to Child Protective Services, legally required, and she explained exactly why. I had been locked out of my home by a parent. I was a minor. There were mandated reporting requirements. The second call was to a youth advocacy organization called Harbor. They had a social worker who specialized in exactly this kind of situation, teens in housing crisis, and who could help navigate the next steps. The third call was one she made while I sat there, to my mother. I watched Miss Patterson's face during that call. It told me what I needed to know about how my mother responded. Miss Patterson hung up after 8 minutes and looked at me carefully. "Your mother says you left voluntarily," she said. I looked at my hands on my knees. "Okay," I said. "I believe you," Miss Patterson said. "I want you to know that." Those 4 words, "I believe you." I have never forgotten the specific weight of them in that moment. The system was not simple. I want to be honest about that, because I think stories like mine get flattened into a before, and after that skips the middle. And the middle is the part that matters. The middle was complicated. CPs investigated and determined that while the situation was concerning, There was not sufficient evidence. My mother maintained her version, Raymond maintained his. I had no physical evidence of what the house had been to substantiate a specific finding that met the legal threshold for intervention. What they could do was connect me to resources. Harbor connected me to a transitional housing program specifically for youth in crisis. Not a shelter, a supervised housing program for teens 16 and older who had nowhere safe to go. A house on a residential street with 5 other young people and 2 house parents and rules that were reasonable and applied fairly. I moved in on a Thursday. I said goodbye to Priya on her front step. She hugged me for a long time. "This isn't over," she said. "This is just chapter 2. She was right. She was completely right. The house on Elm Street, that's what we called it, though it was on a different street. Just always the Elm Street house in my memory was the place where I grew up for real. Not grew up in the sense of becoming an adult. Grew up in the sense of understanding what I was made of. There were 5 of us there in my time. We were all different. Different backgrounds, different stories, different ways of having arrived at a supervised house with a house mother named Clara and a house father named Denis, who made pancakes on Sunday and required everyone to participate in the weekly house meeting, and who responded to every crisis with the same steady, unruffled warmth. Clara and Denis were not my parents, but they were the first adults who showed me consistently and without exception what adults were supposed to be. Clara, in particular. She had a way of appearing in doorways without drama when someone was struggling. She didn't knock loudly and announce herself. She just appeared, leaning against the frame, and said, "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I'm just here." She said that to me on my 3rd night, when I was sitting on my bed with my $11.60 still in my backpack and a feeling in my chest that had no clean name. She appeared in the doorway. "You don't have to talk if you don't want to," she said. "I'm just here." I talked. Not everything, not all at once, but something. And she stayed. The Harbor program required school attendance, which was fine with me. School was still the rope. I went back every day. I sat in Mrs. Okafor's class, she taught English, and she had a habit of assigning reading that turned out to be exactly what each student needed even when she couldn't have known. And I wrote papers that she returned with comments that were more conversation than grade. Things like, "This line stopped me. It's exactly right. Keep going. Keep going." She wrote that a lot on my papers. Keep going. I started, around this time, keeping a journal. Not for any therapeutic reason, though Clara had suggested it. It's because I needed somewhere to put things that had nowhere else to go. I wrote every night. What had happened that day. What I was thinking, what I was afraid of, what I was working toward. I wrote about what I wanted, not in a dreaming, vague way, in a specific way that felt almost like research. I wanted to finish high school. I wanted to go to college. I wanted to study something that helped people in situations like mine. I didn't know yet what that was called, what degree, what field, but the direction was clear. And I wanted, eventually, to have a life that was entirely mine. No garbage bags, no deadbolts. Mine. I wrote that down and underlined it twice. The turning point of this story is not dramatic. I want you to know that, because I think we expect turning points to be loud. A single moment that changes everything in one gesture. Mine was quiet. It happened in the 2nd semester of my junior year. Mrs. Okafor pulled me aside after class one afternoon. "Aisha," she said, "I want to talk to you about something." She had in her hand a printout, a scholarship, for a summer program at a university 3 hours away, a pre-college intensive for first-generation students with demonstrated financial need and academic excellence, all expenses covered, a stipend, and at the end of it, support for college applications. "I nominated you," she said, 6 weeks ago. "They accepted you." I looked at the printout. My name was on it, Aisha Brennan. Accepted. Program begins July 7th. "You nominated me," I said. "You're exactly who this is for," she said simply. I looked up from the paper. "I'm in the Harbor House," I said. "I don't know if the program allows." I called the program coordinator, she said. "Your housing situation is not a barrier. They have supported students in similar circumstances before." She paused. "You would need to arrange permission through Clara." "But I already spoke to Clara." "You spoke to Clara?" She said yes immediately, Mrs. Okafor said. She said, and I'm quoting her directly, "That girl was made for something like this." I stood in the classroom with the printout in my hands. The afternoon light coming through the windows was the specific gold of late spring. "Why are you doing this for me?" I asked. She looked at me for a moment. "Because you've been rowing as hard as you can with a boat that has a hole in it," she said. "I'm just helping you patch it." I went back to the Elm Street house that night, and I sat on my bed with the printout, and I wrote in my journal for 2 hours. I wrote about the summer program. I wrote about college. I wrote about what came after college. I wrote about who I was going to be. I wrote, "They did not break me." And then, underneath it, a question I had been carrying for a year. Why? Why the garbage bag? Why the deadbolt? Why me? What had I done or failed to do or been or not been that made my own mother choose a man's comfort over her daughter's home? I sat with that question for a long time, and then I wrote something that surprised me as I wrote it. It doesn't matter why. What matters is what I do from here. The summer program changed my life with the completeness of something that arrives exactly when you have become the person who can receive it. The campus was large and unfamiliar, and I spent the first 3 days slightly overwhelmed by the size of everything. But the program itself was a room, metaphorically, full of people like me. First-generation students, students who had navigated systems, students who had gaps in their transcripts, difficult home situations, complicated paths to this point, students who were rowing hard. I found my people in a way I hadn't found them since Priya, since Mrs. Okafor, since Clara. The program director was a woman named Dr. Yates, who taught a course on social policy and who had the specific passion of someone who had spent 30 years watching systems fail people and had decided that the most useful thing she could do was train the next generation to fix them. The people who change systems, she said on the first day of the course, are almost always the people the systems failed first, because they know where the holes are. I wrote that down. I thought about the holes. I thought about the 16-year-old girl on the school steps with $11.60. I thought about what she needed and didn't have. And I started to understand what I was building toward: social work, specifically youth social work, specifically the intersection of housing insecurity and education for young people aging out of systems that weren't designed with them fully in mind. I had found the name for the direction I'd been rowing toward. I came back from that summer with something I hadn't left with, not just the college counseling, the application support, the letters of recommendation that Dr. Yates and Mrs. Okafor and Clara would eventually write, a sense of my own shape, of who I actually was, and a certainty, not arrogance, not performance, just certainty that I was going to be fine. I need to tell you about my mother, because she didn't disappear. She called me for the first time 6 months after the garbage bag. I was at the Elm Street house, a Thursday evening, doing homework at the kitchen table while Denis made dinner. Her name on my phone. I stared at it for a long time. Denis looked over. He didn't say anything. He just turned back to the stove. I answered. Her voice was the same and completely different. The same physical sound, something underneath it that I hadn't heard before. "Aisha," she said. "Mom," I said. A long pause. "Are you okay?" she said. I thought about that question, what it meant coming from her, what the right answer was. "I'm okay," I said. "I heard you're at a program," she said, "that the school set up a place for you." "Yes," I said. Another pause. Longer. "I've been thinking," she said, and then nothing else for a moment. "Okay," I said. "I want to explain, Mom." My voice was steady. I surprised myself with how steady it was. "I'm not ready for that conversation. I might be someday. But I'm not ready now." She was quiet. "Okay," she said. Her voice was very small. "I'm okay," I said again. "I'm going to be okay." "I know," she said. "I know you will." She hung up. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone and I breathed. Denis put a cup of tea in front of me without comment. "Thanks," I said. "Anytime," he said. I graduated high school the following June. Clara and Denise came to the ceremony. Mrs. Okafor was there because she came to every graduation of every student she'd ever pulled aside with a printout. Priya was there, in the audience, with her whole family, Meena and Vijay and Rohan, who had put my garbage bag in his trunk 2 years ago and never said a word about it. I walked across that stage. I received my diploma. And when they called my name, Aisha Brennan, and I walked to the center and I turned to look at the audience, I looked for the specific faces I was looking for. Clara, Denis, Mrs. Okafor, Priya, the faces of the people who had chosen me when they didn't have to. I held my diploma, and I thought, this is mine. Nobody can put this in a garbage bag. Nobody can lock this outside. This is mine. I was admitted to the State University on a scholarship that covered 70% of my costs. Harbor connected me to additional funding that covered the rest, plus a small living stipend for the first year. I moved into the dormitory in September. I called Clara from my new room the first night. "How is it?" she said. "Big," I said, loud. "Good, I think. It's definitely good," she said. "Clara," I said. "I want you to know, I know," she said. "Don't thank me. That's not how it works." "What do you mean?" "You thank me by doing what you're going to do," she said. "That's the only currency I accept." I laughed. "Okay," I said. "Go make friends," she said. "You need people." She was right. I made friends, real ones, the ones you find in college, when you've stopped being someone who is surviving and started being someone who is actually living. I majored in social work. I took every course about youth housing, about crisis intervention, about the systems that are supposed to catch young people and often have holes in them the size of a person. In my junior year, I did a practicum at an organization called Threshold, a youth services nonprofit that worked with teenagers in housing crisis in our city. On the first day of my practicum, I sat in the intake room and a 16-year-old girl came in with a garbage bag. She sat across from me. She had a look on her face that I recognized completely and specifically because I had worn it myself. The look of someone who is holding it together by the thinnest possible thread and needs someone to see that without making her perform the thread out loud. I leaned forward. "I'm Aisha," I said. She looked at me. "I was 16 when something like this happened to me too," I said. "I'm not going to ask you to explain anything right now. I just want you to know that you're in the right place. And you're going to be okay." She looked at me for a long moment. Something in her face shifted. Not fixed, not resolved, just slightly less alone. I recognized that shift too. I knew exactly what it cost and what it was worth. I graduated with my BSW, Bachelor of Social Work, 4 years after walking across the high school stage with Clara and Denis and Mrs. Okafor in the audience. This time, they were there again. All of them. Plus Dr. Yates, who had driven 3 hours, plus Priya, who was at her own university but had taken a Friday off, plus a new face, Marcus, who I had met in my junior year and who had become the person I chose, and who chose me back in the particular way that feels nothing like the relationships we watched as children, and everything like the relationship we didn't know was possible. My mother was not there. I want to tell you about my mother, where we are now, and I want to be honest about it. She called me twice a year for the 4 years of college. Carefully, without pressure. She had left Raymond. That happened about a year after my birthday. The details she gave me were sparse and I didn't push. She was different in these calls. Not transformed. Not the mother I had needed her to be at 8 or 12 or 16. Just different. Quieter. Something in her that had been managed by proximity to Raymond had been given some room to breathe. I listened to her. I was careful. I did not go fast. Trust, when it has been genuinely broken, does not rebuild on a schedule. It rebuilds through actions, repeatedly, over time. My mother showed up for the actions. She was consistent in her calls. She did not make demands. She did not ask me to rewrite the history into something more comfortable for her. On my graduation day, she sent me a card. Handwritten. Long. The longest thing she had ever written to me. I read it twice, and then I put it in the drawer where I keep the things I'm not ready to process and am not ready to let go of. She did not come to the ceremony. She asked if she could. I said I needed more time. She said okay, and kept calling. I am 24 now. I have a master's degree in social work that I finished last spring, funded by a combination of scholarships and a fellowship from the state that supports people entering youth advocacy work. I have a job at Threshold, the organization where I did my practicum, as a case manager and intake specialist, which means I am the person who sits in the intake room when teenagers walk in with garbage bags. I sit across from them. I know what they need before they say a word. I have sat across from 47 of them in the 2 years I've been there. Every single one of them, I have given what Clara gave me on night 3 in the doorway of my room at the Elm Street house. I appear. I say, "You don't have to talk if you don't want to. I'm just here." And I stay. Last spring, I went back to my old high school. Mrs. Okafor had retired at the end of the year, and the school was holding a small event, a classroom renamed in her honor, a gathering of former students. I stood in that classroom, the same room where she had handed me a printout with my name on it. She was smaller than I remembered, the way people sometimes get when you've grown and they've stilled. But her eyes were the same. That specific quality of attention that made you feel like whatever you said mattered. I gave a short speech about what she had done. Not just for me, for the 40 or 50 students who were in that room, all of whom she had pulled aside at some point with a printout or a comment, or just the specific attention of someone who saw you clearly. Afterward, she took my hands in hers. "You became what I thought you'd become," she said. "You helped," I said. "You did the work," she said. "I just handed you a piece of paper." I shook my head. "You told me to keep going," I said. "Every paper. Keep going. For 2 years. That's not a piece of paper. That's a lifeline." She squeezed my hands. "Keep going," she said. Same 2 words. Same weight. Here is what I want to say to you. I have thought a long time about how to end this story, because it doesn't have the shape of most stories. There is no single villain who got what they deserved. There is no single moment of triumph. There is no neat bow. What there is this: a girl with a garbage bag. People who appeared in doorways, a rope she held onto with both hands even when it burned. And 8 years of showing up, every day, as the person she decided to become on a school step with $11.60. If you are 16 right now, and something has happened to you that should not have happened. If you are in a house that does not feel safe, if you are holding a rope that is thin and you don't know how long you can hold on, I need you to hear this. The people who failed you did not define you. They revealed what you could survive. And what you can survive is more than you know. The rope is real. Hold it. Every single day, hold it. Find your Mrs. Okafor. Find your Clara. Find your Priya. They exist. I promise you they exist. In schools and libraries and community centers and organizations, and sometimes in the car that shows up 20 minutes after you make the call. Make the call. You are not asking for too much. You are asking for exactly what you deserve. And to anyone listening who is the adult in this story, the teacher, the neighbor, the family friend, the person who has noticed that something is not right in a young person's life, appear in the doorway. That's all. You don't have to fix it. You don't have to have answers. Just appear. Say, I see you. I'm here. You don't have to talk if you don't want to. And stay. You don't know which girl or boy you're talking to. You don't know what she's going to become. But I can tell you, from the specific experience of having been that girl on those school steps on her birthday with her garbage bag and her $11, she is going to become something that will take your breath away. She just needs someone to stay long enough to find out. My name is Aisha Brennan. On my 16th birthday, my mother handed me a garbage bag and locked the door. I was just a 16-year-old girl. And I became exactly who I was always supposed to be. Not in spite of what happened. Through it, and because of every person who appeared in a doorway and stayed. Hold the rope. Keep going.